Hello, hello, hey everyone. Thanks a lot for joining us today. Very excited about this session. And today we have Daniel joining us from Mirantis. Daniel, how's it going?
Good, good, good. All good. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, and it's being recorded, so you all can watch it later on. We already have close to 100 people join, so that's nice to see. And we've just started, like in a few seconds. But and I was at KubeCon in what was it? I forgot.
La-
Chicago.
yeah, yeah. Last week, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago. Oh, it was 2 weeks. It
Yeah,
felt, feels longer.
yeah,
But yeah, and obviously the very nice people from Mirantis were there. And one of the trends I saw was a lot of companies were talking about developers, that and eBPF. So
yeah.
I think it's pretty nice to see because there's so many challenges devs face when working with. Sorry, I'm still recovering.
No worries.
Working with Kubernetes, and even maybe if it's their job, to work with Kubernetes. So before we start the session, I have a hot take question for Daniel. Daniel, do you think it's a light question?
Yeah.
Do you think it's okay for it's okay to give developers access to control over kubectl?
Well, I mean, that depends, right? It depends on the skill set of the developer, and that's something that we'll be talking today. We recognize that not everybody has the skill set and the familiarity with Kubernetes to even know what kubectl is, or to even have access to the clusters so they can interact with kubectl. But definitely, I mean, if a developer has enough understanding of Kubernetes, of the foundation, and have access to a cluster, yeah, why not playing around with kubectl? I mean, it's kind of the official client from Kubernetes, right? So as long as they know what they are doing, that's fine. Of course, I know there are certain controls and guardrails in place that some companies might want to have, so the developer can access specific resources. But I don't see a reason why the developer shouldn't have that uh,
Yeah,
kind of
no,
interaction.
couldn't agree more. Also, like, yeah, depends on organizations and how much knowledge they have. But and now there are so many tools in the market that make it, like, if you talk about like your access controls and everything. Um, but anyway, we're talking about developers today,
Yeah.
and I'm very excited. So the session format is we have a nice little presentation and a demo for you because we like doing stuff hands-on during these live sessions. I'll be monitoring the chat and I'll collect all your questions. So if you have any questions, you don't have to wait till the end. Just put it in the chat. I'll collect it, and it's being streamed on LinkedIn as well. But yeah, Daniel, take it away. I'll add your slides on the screen.
Awesome. Thank you, Kunal. And yeah, definitely, if there are any questions, feel free to interrupt me, and we can deal with that. I left at the end of the session after the demo time also in the slides for a Q&A. Any questions there? But if there is an urgent question, feel free to stop, and we'll deal with that. So, all right, again, thanks everybody for joining. We'll be discussing a little bit today about how to manage Kubernetes applications without Kubernetes expertise. We'll be talking specifically about Lens AppIQ, which is one of the new offerings that Mirantis as a company has launched recently. So to facilitate this kind of management to developers specifically. A little bit about me. I'm the Lens AppIQ team lead. I lead engineering, all the engineering efforts in terms of development of the product, gathering of requirements, and seeing what's out there in the market to see how to help at the end of the day the developers, which is our main goal. In terms of my background, I identify myself a lot with this product because I come from an application developer background. I was not a DevOps. I was not a platform engineer when I started my journey in cloud computing. So when the first time I face a Kubernetes cluster, I didn't know how to basically manage it, how to interact with it. The first instinct from my side was, okay, how do I SSH into this? because of course by at that moment virtual machines and nodes, SSH into nodes was the way to access your instances and so on. Um, so when I faced Kubernetes, it was a challenge for me to understand even how to get access to it, how to start with it. So as a developer, I understand the challenge behind it, and this is one of the reasons why we developed a Lens AppIQ to facilitate this kind of initial constraints and phases against Kubernetes. In terms of the agenda, we'll talk a little bit about the challenges with Kubernetes. Why are these? Is this a problem? As Kunal was mentioning, it's widely recognized nowadays, and that was one of the outcomes of KubeCon. It is a problem indeed that a lot of developers are spending a lot of time in Kubernetes without having the knowledge for it. That becomes a problem. We'll see why. We'll discuss a little bit what is the ideal scenario that we think modern development teams should have. What is Lens AppIQ? How does it help modern teams? And of course, we'll do a demo. I'll try to keep it short with the slides because, of course, the demos are more fun than slides. But just to give a context for everybody of why we did it, what is the problem we'll see, I think it's important to have this kind of understanding. And let's start right away. So what is the challenge with Kubernetes? So as you guys know, Kubernetes is already mainstream. A lot of the stats out there in any of the surveys demonstrate that more than 5 million developers or engineers in general are constantly interacting with Kubernetes. And Kubernetes is in most of the companies in the CNCF environment landscape. So there is no escape for it. And what is the problem? That the Kubernetes learning curve is very steep. So for a lot of developers to even start on Kubernetes and start understanding all the bunch of concepts that exist there, it's complicated. All the concepts in Kubernetes are very infrastructure centric. We talk about volumes and services and storage and network and a lot of concepts that are very infrastructure centric. So for developer, this of course is a challenge. It is one of the first obstacles because as developers, we're very focused on the code base, on how to build the code, databases, connections, a lot of different concepts. But when we talk about Kubernetes, and then we get presented with this bunch of concepts, config maps, secrets, and whatnot, things get a little bit tricky. And as I was mentioning, the Kubernetes surface area is wide, so there are a lot of concepts. At the end, we need to have in mind that Kubernetes is just an API. And because it's an API, there are a lot of endpoints, and each endpoint means different things, different resources. So we need to know how to translate a single application, let's say your Node.js web server, or I don't know, a React application into that world. What does it mean? So the next problem we see is not only the understanding of the underlying concepts, but also how to surface Kubernetes to start finding answers about your application. So let's say you're in a team and somebody with more experience or a DevOps help you to deploy your application to get there. But then after your application is there running, how do you surface it? How do you get information about it? Then all these different concepts that we talked about before, containers, nodes, secrets, network, they come into place, and then they don't allow you to easily find these answers, to check logs, to check metrics, to check what are the events that your application are facing. And as I was mentioning before, how to translate a single Node.js or React application, a Python app into Kubernetes, that's a challenge for developers. So that's one of the reasons why this is so mainstream nowadays. It's a common problem that people are seeing there. Because more importantly, this is maybe something that teams can handle when they are small. If there is a DevOps or a platform engineer that can cover the footprint of, I don't know, let's say 3, 4, 5 developers. But as the organization grows and the team becomes larger, more applications need to be developed, more services need to be deployed, then a single person cannot do everything. And at the end, the application should be owned by whoever is the owner of it, but whoever is the author. So the developers who are the author, who understand what's going on with the application, what kind of logs they should be checking in, and so on. Then that's when things get tricky. If they don't know how to get those and how to get there, how can a platform engineer can allow or help them, enable them, so they can do the work for them. Developers struggle to understand what their applications are, as we mentioned before, and because of that, troubleshooting an application is hard. Getting the CPU and memory consumption, accessing logs, and so on. And at the same time, as I was mentioning, for operators, platform engineers, and DevOps, the struggle is the same, because then now they are spending more time helping developers, kind of hand-holding a little bit them to get them the information that they need, or to show them how to get the information that they need, instead of focusing on managing infrastructure and optimizing everything. So they have these challenges of how to give enough access to a developer without also allowing them to do anything. How to keep compliance with the standards? How do we ensure that people are not abusing CPU and memory consumption, and they are using whitelisted container registries, and a lot of different concepts. And at the very end, this only hurts organizations, because the developers, they should be focused on what's important for a company, producing value, and that value is in their applications, not so much in all these concepts of infrastructure and these day two operation things. In numbers, just to present these, 25% of developers' time, according to multiple surveys, is wasted attempting to navigate Kubernetes, sometimes successfully, sometimes not so much. 96% of the ops teams report wasting most of the time helping developers. So these demonstrate what I was mentioning before. There's a lot of hand-holding. There's a lot of wastage of time in trying to navigate Kubernetes, rather than focusing on the tooling and producing value for your applications. And 62% of the organization experience application deployment delays, slower times to market, because of course with all these challenges, then if navigating Kubernetes is difficult, then of course the pace in which changes are pushed to a production environment, they get slower. So what is the ideal scenario that we see out there? And I think that most organizations are trying to pursue is a platform engineer that can have a single pane of glass and organize the developers so they can have access to clusters. And in this single pane of glass, they can configure Airbag, they can have application management, they can enforce some sort of governance. And then for developers, with this kind of abstraction from Kubernetes, from the complexity of Kubernetes, they are just thinking in terms of applications. They are not thinking in terms of clusters. They are not thinking in terms of workloads and pods and deployments and whatnot. They are thinking in terms of their applications. So this is the ideal scenario that we're pursuing. A self-serve portal where developers can access the application, where the complexities of Kubernetes are hidden, where only the relevant information of the application is there presented to the developers. Not so much about anything that is not relevant, all the metadata that an object can have, and so on and so forth, but the information that is key to them: environment variable, container images, the config maps, volume path, and things like that. Anything that makes sense to the developer and not so much to the operator. Allowing monitoring and troubleshooting without handholding. So having this platform or this solution in which the developer can log in and see right away their application without understanding how to kubectl into the cluster, as we were talking with Kunal before. And of course, where besides this kind of access that you give to the developers, you can still limit permissions and you can ensure security and compliance. So what is the solution for this? What is the solution that here at Mirantis we try to find for this? This was specifically Lens AppIQ. This is the reason why we developed this solution. This is the reason why we are still working on improving the product, so we can get there into this ideal scenario. So organizations, they don't need to spend the resources trying to build an internal development platform, because this is what happens when we get into these issues that we were mentioning before. Most of companies then start trying to develop their own solution, their own internal development platform. But it's not an easy task, because then you need to handle a lot of different concepts, upgrades to Kubernetes, to different resources and whatnot. So it becomes a product with another product within the company, and at the end, it's a burden of resources, of time, instead of focusing, and as we mentioned before, in what actually produce value to the company, which is developing their own applications, what they are pushing out to the market. And what is Lens AppIQ? So I mentioned this is kind of the solution that we built for this. So Lens AppIQ is a web-based software as a service offering and delivering app-centric intelligence, providing a self-serve portal for developers to manage their applications, to manage and troubleshoot, abstracting away the complexities of Kubernetes. And for platform engineers, it's a tool that ensures that they can do compliance, guarantee that the performance is being respected across their organization, that security practices are there, and in some way tackles all the challenges that we mentioned before. This is how Lens AppIQ looks like, at least our UI. We will dig into this. And more importantly, how does this solution help my developers? Well, initially it gives them autonomy, first of all, because by abstracting the complexities of Kubernetes, you don't need to spend your time not only learning about Vue.js and React and Python and LLMs and nowadays and artificial intelligence and all these great challenges that you have as a developer in terms of building your application, databases, scaling and whatnot. But instead of focusing only on that, you also need to then learn Kubernetes. So by having this kind of solution, you kind of remove that part from the equation, and then you can still focus on what's important to you, managing that, knowing how to connect to a database and doing CRUD operations and optimizing your UIs and things like that. It helps developers because it gives them clarity of the dependencies. So all the different objects, all the different resources in the Kubernetes land that are associated with your application. So in a way, this platform then tells you what your application is in Kubernetes, allows you to tackle one of the challenges that we mentioned before. It translates what the application is for you in the land of Kubernetes. And that, of course, in the engineering mind, then allow you to understand, okay, my application has a service, my application has a pod, it has secrets, so all these different resources. And then as the owner of the application, then it's easier to interact with a platform engineer, with an operators person to see, to understand, hey, these are all my resources, this is everything, this is my whole footprint in my cluster, and this is what I maintain. Application monitoring, because through Lens AppIQ, you have access to real-time application updates and critical insights, anything that's going on with your application. You can check logs, metrics, CPU memory consumption. You can track events, and we'll see a little bit about that in the demo. And last but not least, well, this is app-centric. It's not infrastructure-centric. So we can forget a little bit about all the details of networking, storage, and workloads and whatnot, and focus on the application. So for a developer, that's easier to digest, easier to manage. And now let's go to the fun part. So that's it in terms of the slides. I don't know if there are any questions. Kunal, let me know. If not, I'll proceed with the demo.
Yeah, I'm collecting some questions. We're getting quite a few here from mostly LinkedIn as well. So let's answer those in the end.
Okay, awesome. Sounds good. So let me just quickly jump in here. All right. Cool. I'll share my whole screen in a second, but I'll start with here. So this is Lens AppIQ. This is a SaaS service, so it's accessible through this URL, apps, lenscloud.io. It's open for public. Anybody can register themselves. When you register, you get entitled with a free plan. The free plan is free forever. There are no limitations in terms of functionality. All the functionality that we have developed is there for anybody, no matter the plan that they have. The only limitation is in terms of how many clusters you can connect to our platform, and how many nodes and how many users you can invite. But other than that, this is a good opportunity for anybody to sign up and try it out. When you do so, the first step that you need to do on Lens AppIQ, you will see this less crowded. You will see here just 3 options. And the immediate action is just to connect a cluster. And the action to connect the cluster is very simple. This basically means that we need to install an agent in your cluster to be able to, in high-level terms, export the information of the cluster to our API so it can be accessible through our dashboard. To connect a cluster, the process is very simple. You can simply assign a name to your cluster. Let's say I have a Colima cluster. Optional, you can enable application deployments. We'll talk about that at the very end. But by default, you can simply click generate command. This will generate a kubectl command for you to apply with a magic link. This magic link is just a chart of the resources that we need to install, the agent and some cluster roles and some permissions that we need to do there. And it's simply a matter of copying and pasting it into your cluster. This is an operation that typically in the use case that we were talking about during the slides, a platform engineer will do it. So the platform engineer or a developer with more experience in Kubernetes, somebody with access to a cluster, will do this operation to then enable the rest of the team. So you just need to copy this command, run it in your terminal while having access to your cluster, and then we start the deployment of our agents. When the process finishes up, your cluster appears here, and you can track its status. This particular cluster has more all the agents the possible agents that we have, because it has enabled application deployments. But the process is very straightforward. In terms of the cluster, as soon as you connect it, we explore where are the namespaces that are there creating your cluster. So these are the namespaces that I have in my cluster. If I go to kubectl and I do kubectl get namespaces, I will get the same list. Some metadata that we have in terms of the connection from our agent to the cluster and our control plane. So the Lens AppIQ control plane, what is running there? By default, you will only have the ship controller, BC and BC body, and ship agent. The rest of them, if you didn't enable application deployments, they won't appear there. So how does this work? As soon as you connect a cluster, our controllers, they start scanning your cluster. They start collecting all the different workloads that are running there to translate what a workload is into an application. And then they build this list. So that's a step 1, the discovery of the applications, what we call the discovery of the apps. What are these apps for us? They are any workload resource that is running in your cluster. We do a computation of all the different resources associated to each, and we convert that into a single application. So if you have deployments, stateful sets, and daemon sets, we compute those, and each one of them becomes a single application to us. However, you have in the dashboard this switcher here that you can see. It says grouped apps, or if I toggle it off, it will show me all these different workloads. But if I maintain a click, what this says is that besides computing the workloads, maybe you want to filter anything that doesn't have the Kubernetes recommended labels to tag what an application is. So the concept of an application doesn't really exist in Kubernetes. This is a translation we're doing, an opinionated translation from a workload to an application. Now, what Kubernetes does have is that they have these concepts of recommended labels that are mentioned in their official documentation. And if you use something like Helm, this is a good practice that usually is there in all Helm charts. By using these labels in your deployments, then you are telling this is the application name X. this is my application name Y, and you can then associate multiple workloads with other tagging, like this instance label. So what we do is we compute all of those applications, and then we use the labels to basically filter them out and to group them. So you can see that Shipa agent, which is our main agent, is a single application, but it's composed by multiple workloads, in this case by 6. This application only has 1. This Nginx application only has 1. So we get all of them and we compute them. And we start tracking the general status. So as you can see, all these applications are running. If I go there to, let's say, this Nginx application, then I can see for the details of all of the components for it. And this is the view that I was mentioning, the computation we do about all the objects associated with this application. So my app has a deployment. This is the main workload resource. And associated with this is a config map, a service account, a service, an endpoint, a pod, a replica set. So all these are this is the footprint of this Nginx application. So as a developer, then I know, okay, I have a Node.js app, in this case Nginx, and these are all the resources in the land of Kubernetes that are composing this application. And then I can inspect them, and I can see general metadata, or I can see the whole definition of this pod, for example. And then I see these are Kubernetes concepts. But then as a developer, I don't need to understand that. I can simply see the computation. And if I'm curious enough, then I can go there and see the definition and start getting familiar with Kubernetes, kind of doing reverse engineering. So you have all this map of all the composition of the application, and now I can dig into each of the parts, and then I can get familiar with how containers are defined, what the image of my application is, environment variables, and so on and so forth. Now, this is just to see in a visual manner what your application is, but we are pulling the relevant information from the user, which is one of the points that I was making during the slides. We're pulling what is the container image that is running for this workload or for this application, any environment variable that is defined there, where is this application exposed through this load balancer, this endpoint, what are the internal IPs of this application, and so on and so forth. We can also see the pods associated with these apps. So all the what we call also units. So if this application had 10 pods or 10 units, we will see all of them here. You can inspect also the overall definition of this pod here, and we also take the relevant information. So what is the CPU requests and memory definitions that the application have? What are the ports where this is defined, the container image? So the concepts that are important to the developers that will help them know, okay, I developed my code, I built a container image through Docker, I push it to Docker Hub, to ECR, to any container registry, and I have some sort of deployment mechanism to get my application there. So now, what else? How do I troubleshoot this app? So you can go here to Lens AppIQ, check the metadata, check the pod information, and make sure that your environment variables are there. The definition has the right set of ports, that the CPU and request limits are enough, and so on and so forth. I think we have right now we're doing some updates here in production. So these metrics usually shows a chart of the memory and CPU consumption. This will be probably live in half an hour. More importantly, we track all the events that are happening to your application. So you can see that this application has been doing a lot of security scans. And this shows you, as a developer, it allows you to keep track of anything that is happening. Every time an application is deployed, when it gets restarted, if the pods are restarted for any reason, if the application goes into an error, if there is a security scan, and so on. More importantly, you can see the live logs of your application. So you can simply go there, click logs, you can copy all these logs, you can download them, you can see the raw logs, you can search. So by presenting this quick access to the logs of the whole application, you don't need to know how to get this information from kubectl. You don't need access to the cluster, first of all. That's something I missed mentioning. As a developer, as a platform engineer, you set up your cluster, and then you can invite multiple people to this organization through different roles. You can invite somebody as a developer through the email address, assign a team to it, and then if the application is set to be accessed by that team, that person already can see the application without direct access to the cluster. So you can imagine, and we'll show a quick demonstration of that. But you can imagine that then, as a developer, I don't even need to have kubectl installed in my computer and know how to get the kubeconfig of this cluster to start accessing this information. You have it immediately on the web. And through multiple clients, we have a CLI as well, where you can access this information. So instead of doing kubectl logs of your pod and having access to kubectl and the cluster and so on and so forth, you can simply log here and see the information live of your application. If security scans are enabled, then you will see here all the security scans performed and any report if there is anything relevant there. And you can set up webhooks. So you can quickly set here, and you can do that. But when testing this application, you can set up a name and a general description for your application, and you can track every time your application is operated, when it's deployed, when it's restarted, when it's stopped, when it's out of scale, and so on, when the app goes into an error, and if it is deployed with our engine, when environment variables are changed, CNAMEs, config map, etc. And you can send this information to any of common alerting systems, Slack, VictorOps. You can even set your custom webhook and use something like this site. I will do like a quick demonstration of that. And then you can get alerted. So getting these alerts, even if you're not there, of course, logging 24/7 into this dashboard, you will still get information about when your application is down for any reason. So as a developer, you can see that you have this real-time monitoring, and you can support your application without even the help of a platform engineer. And additionally, you can see all the YAML definition of your application. This is a full chart of the app. You can specify if you want to see the definition just of the service, and see all the specs defined there, or for the config map, and so on and so forth. Now, something interesting is that if you enable the application deployment, so we recognize, first of all, that all different companies have different deployment strategies. And this deployment of applications nowadays is a little bit commoditized. So anybody can use different tooling and get the applications there, and that's completely fine. So that's the reason why we're focusing on this monitoring and troubleshooting of the applications. However, if you don't know how to deploy an application, if you don't have a formal strategy, if you're new to Kubernetes, then you can install our deployment engine. You can simply deploy applications by having a single Docker image or a container image, actually, stored in I don't know, let's say a container registry, in my case, Docker Hub. And then you can simply use our UI or our CLI and hook that up with a CI system or something like that to deploy your application, to get your application there. Because we present all the different namespaces, so depending on your permissions and so on, you will be able to deploy this. A sample of this is this bulletin application. It has this testing sample image, and it was deployed through that mechanism. So you can see that to do so, it's a matter of just simply getting the Docker image, clicking deploy, and that's it. If you need to add environment variables, change the port in which this application needs to be exposed, then you can do that. Of course, this is a very simplistic way of deployment. This doesn't cover multi-container deployments and things like that, because again, we recognize that there are multiple deployment strategies. This is a quick way just to get an application there, translate it into Kubernetes, creating services, ingresses, anything that is relevant to your application, so it can be accessible, and you as a developer can quickly test something. So this is a way to do that. And if you do that, then you have the ability to control this further. You can do rollbacks, you can restart your application, stop it. You can configure environment variables and so on and so forth. So if I do, I don't know, I have an API token, and let's say it's a private variable, and I don't know, I have a specific token there, I can simply add it. I'm going to restart my application, and that's it. Then the environment variable gets added there to your API, to your application, and then, of course, to the associated pod and so on. Now, as I mentioned, one of the powerful things of this is getting this real-time tracking. So again, you can set up a quick webhook for, let's say, I'm going to use this site. It's a webhook tester. And I'm going to create quickly one webinar. And I want to be notified about anything happening to my application. I'm just going to use this URL here. I'm going to create a webhook for my app. And then any operation associated with this should be triggered here. So let's do let's see what's the last event I have here, just to do something different. I think I can do, yeah, so I have the environment variable set. Let's do another environment variable. Just for testing purposes. If this is a simple test, but of course, just to get things there. So I set up a new environment variable for my application, and this operation is running. It's almost there. I got completed. It tells Lens AppIQ also keeps track of who is doing what. So if this operation was done by a different user, it would show up in here with all the details for it. And we receive here our webhook of, hey, user X added an environment variable to your bulletin application, view the details of the event. And it's basically the same principle for any of the events that we track. So if there was a deployment, you can track the deployment updates. Every time the application gets stopped, it gets restarted. Any of the events that your application might be facing. And last but not least, to avoid taking too much of time, as we mentioned before, it is important also for platform engineers, once you enable developer, to still maintain certain level of control. So we have this policy section where you can define certain rules and tie these policies to a whole namespace or to the whole cluster to track what is the compliance state of all the applications running in that namespace. So for example, I have this prod policy that defines that the application should request at least 100 millicores of CPU, limited to 200 megabytes of memory, that it should only be deployed from this whitelisted container registry, that should have a specific CNAMEs. I can enable security scan and ignore certain CVEs or not. I can do more stuff. I can do auto-scaling rules and specify what should be the configuration of any HPA, of any horizontal pod autoscaler. But more importantly, I can tie these rules to a specific namespace or to the whole cluster. And by doing so, I can also add webhooks here and track anytime these rules are violated. But as soon as I tie these to a particular namespace, then Lens AppIQ generates a compliance report for each application. So in this case, that policy is only tied to my Nginx namespace. And in the Nginx namespace, I only have one app. This is the reason why I only have this number here just for this single app. And if I click on it, then this tells me what is the compliance state of this. So you can see there are a lot of greens here. So a lot of things are okay, but a lot of two things are not okay. In this case, the container policy. So I'm using the official image from Nginx, but this policy says that I can only pull from these three registries. So this is a policy that is getting violated, and the resource limits. So it says that Nginx is not defining any CPU limit and any memory limit. So basically, it can consume any amount of resource within the cluster. And that becomes a problem when your cluster is scaling, when your team is scaling, because everybody needs certain piece of the CPU and the memory. So to keep control, then as a platform engineer, you can set up these rules and quickly see, oh, okay, this application is not in compliance. So I can reach out to this team, or the owner of this application can quickly see this and say, hey, you know what, we need to define the CPU and memory limits. Additionally, we also run a check of the pod security standards. So if there are containers running in privilege mode, if there are volume mount path in the host and things like that, it gets flagged by the system. And then you as a platform engineer, you will get this compliance report, and you can quickly see across clusters, across multiple environments, what is the situation. Because again, one thing to mention, you can connect in here as many clusters as you want from all the different providers available, as long as this is an official Kubernetes distribution, EKS, GKE. This is an EKS cluster, but you can use Google Cloud, Azure, IBM, any Kubernetes distribution, and the logic is the same. You will then have a multi-cluster, multi-cloud view of all the applications running in your company, in your whole infrastructure. And that would allow you to have a big picture of what is the compliance state of all those clusters, and you can dig into all the different applications that are running there. And these insights, that's precisely for an operator person, somebody that wants to see this compliance state, and they have a summary of how many namespaces are being monitored by these policies, how many apps, how many apps are non-compliant, how many policy violations, and for the details of this. One thing that I wanted to show, because I think it's important before we stop and start asking, responding to questions, let me quickly share my whole screen. All right. So one of the things that we mentioned is that in the ideal scenario, you will like to, a platform engineer would like to set this up and then enable several developers. But what about if you want to allocate specific developers to a specific application, so everybody cannot see just everything, and a developer can focus on the 3 or 4 apps that they manage, while other teams manage other set of applications. So this is possible. I have on the left side the profile of an admin. So I'm the owner of this organization. I connected the cluster. In this case, I can be the operators or even further higher access because I can set up users and so on. And I invited this user, it's in my personal email, and I set up a developer role for him. And I mentioned that this person is a developer in the Dev A team. So on the right side, I'm logged with that developer role, with that user. And as you can see initially, I don't have access to any application, all right? So the cluster is connected. I can see the cluster, but I cannot see applications because I haven't been given permissions. We are working on bringing this to the UI, but for the sake of the exercise, I'm going to do this through the API. So I want to give this user access to my bulletin board application. So I'm just going to collect the ID of this, and I'm going to grant application access to the team dev A. So any developer within this team then should be able to see this application. This is an option that, again, it will be in around 2 weeks available in the UI. But as soon as I do that, then in the right side with my developer profile, I have access to the bulletin application. I don't have direct access to the cluster. I don't need to kubectl into it, but I still have access to my bulletin application. I cannot see the rest, but I can manage and troubleshoot this app. So now as a developer, I can go there and start getting access to all of the information that I showed before, and getting a sense of what my application is, what are all the events running there, the logs associated with my application, security things, and anything related to that. So if let me trigger this a couple of times just to get some logs here. I can see the logs live, right? And I can set up webhooks. I can see the YAML definitions. I can see the object map and any of the different things that I mentioned before. You can imagine that you can do this for as many applications as you need, as long as you want to share them with that specific user. So now this user is the real owner of this application, and they can manage it and troubleshoot it. All right, I think we're close to hitting the.
Yeah, it was good, great presentation. Thanks for sharing, Daniel. I added in some questions as well, which I'll share in a bit. But let's take some questions from the chat.
Absolutely.
Some of the ones are quick questions. So Shakib is asking, in the free plan, how many clusters can we connect?
Yeah, in the free plan, you can connect up to 2 clusters. You can invite on up to 2 users if I'm not mistaken. But anyways, if you're experimenting and you need to share it with more users, reach out to us in the application. Maybe this is a good opportunity to do these just in
Yeah,
case.
I'll
I
leave
just
all the links in the description below for like the community as well. But I've already added a lot of links in the description.
got
Uh,
it.
there's another question by the same person, which is they need to know how you handle security of client Kubernetes clusters, infrastructure configuration, information that you have fetched in your app.
Security of client Kubernetes cluster configuration information which you fetch. You mean the security of our agents?
Yeah, I think that's what they're going for.
Got it. Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, we're following all the standards. Initially, when you connect a cluster, if you don't enable the application engine, all our agents, they just have read permissions of your cluster. They cannot even perform, deploy other applications or create multiple namespace and things like that. They have a very scope and limited set of permission, specifically because we recognize that not everybody wants to have an agent running there that is able to do anything in their cluster. And we're following all the standards. So all our pods have defined resource consumption limits and CPU to have as small as a footprint as possible in your cluster. And this is some of the practices that we're trying to do. There are some technical dev items here that we're still handling. For example, one of the pods that we deploy, busybody, used to run in privilege mode, so we removed that. Now we're removing another part that will ensure for sure that the security is in compliance.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Daniel. I mean, obviously, because Lens IDE in itself, you have I don't know, 500,000 users, more than
Yeah,
that.
that's right.
So security is goes without saying, it's crucial.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, someone asked about um, can you provide some insights into integration between Lens App IQ and the desktop app?
Yeah,
How they
absolutely.
complement each other?
This is a great question because I didn't mention this. So yes, there is Lens AppIQ has a dedicated integration within Lens. There is since September. There is a new tab, a new section in Lens called Applications. So you can get there and get some of the computations that we do to translate what a workload is and all these different resources into single application. Now from Lens ID, you can connect the cluster. So anything that I mentioned in terms of connecting a cluster, copying the URL and running it in your terminal, you can do it directly from Lens with a single button, because since we are in the cluster context, we can run this operation. And if you have the right access, then you can immediately get this connection. So the integration works in that way. You enable Lens AppIQ, then you
Hmm.
can jump between desktop and web anytime you want. And there are certain views where we present extra information, what we call augmentation. So these policy violations, the events that are running in your associated to your app, and things like that. So that's the integration that we have with Lens.
Yeah, once you have to sign up, and then you will see the option directly in the IDE.
That's right.
First, I was not seeing it, but like then I signed up on the web page, and then when I came back to the IDE, then when you go to your cluster, you will see it. But
That's
yeah,
right.
the sign up links can be found in the description as well. Thanks for sharing, Daniel. There's one nice question, which is what is typically the learning curve for developers who are new to Lens App IQ?
Well, I would say it's pretty straightforward. As you see, all the information that we present from a Kubernetes perspective, it's optional to the developer. I mean, it's good if they start using the platform to get there, but by checking an application, let's say you have a, I don't know, a React application running behind an Nginx image in a cluster, right? And as soon as that get discovered, it will get discovered with whatever the name was assigned to the deployment. And then immediately we pull the information that is relevant to you, the environment variables, the container image. You can see the logs. So the learning curve is not very steep. You just need to go to the UI and start experimenting all these different sections. Um, if you want to get deeper understanding of what this application is in the land of Kubernetes, then yes, you need to go to the object map and see all these YAML files and things like that. But that's like a secondary part. For most of the things that developer can do by checking the log, checking the charts of metrics and memory consumption and things like that, that will help them basically get there.
Yeah, and there are plenty of resources available as well, and the support system is pretty good. So if you have any questions after the session, you can ask it in the community.
Cool.
So one nice question I have over here is you mentioned the app-centric approach for Lens App IQ. How is it different from other K8s management tools?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So because we are focused on applications, you can see that all the UI, all the CLI, all the concepts that we manage, they are around what an application is. If you go to different Kubernetes management tools, the first thing that you will immediately see is pods, deployments, stateful sets, daemon sets, secrets, and all these, uh, let's say, separated or splitted set of resources. And then you kind of lose the connection between these resources because they have a logical connection with the Kubernetes, but you need to know how, for example, a deployment relates to a replica set and to a pod. And then if you go to the traditional Kubernetes management tool, if you want to check, let's say, the pod, yeah, you go to pod. But if you want to see the replica set associated with it, you need to start checking labels and see things like that. When we mention app-centric, is because we're doing that math for you. And we are obscuring all these Kubernetes concept and just showing what the application relevant information is. So that's where the difference lies. A developer doesn't need to understand what a config map is or how a secret is related to a pod. You just need to understand that they have an application, that application is composed by multiple things, that we're doing the computation of those multiple things for you, and we're extracting the information that is important.
Yeah, no, couldn't agree more. From what I spoke when I spoke with a lot of devs, they said more or less the same thing. Like they just want to focus on writing code and not worry about you know
Yeah,
YAML.
yeah.
But all right, I think we have time for one more question before we wrap it up. So for folks who have their own existing applications, when it comes to importing those in Lens App IQ, are there any compatible considerations or maybe limitations that devs should be aware of?
So there are none as long as your application is deployed into a Kubernetes cluster. It means it's following the Kubernetes native construct. So it's either a deployment, a stateful set, daemon set, or a job, if we go even to jobs or current jobs. Um, so there are no limitations for it as long as it's a Kubernetes resource, which it will be if it's running in the cluster. It will be able to be imported. Now, what I would recommend is if you want to have this switcher that I show where you can see grouped apps or or just all the workload resource. If you want your application to prompt there in the group application switcher, ideally you should add these Kubernetes recommended labels. But this is even like a good recommendation from Kubernetes, from the official Kubernetes documentation. So I would say, if possible, try to add these labels. If not, you will still have a way to see your application there, but this is a way to even group multiple workloads. So if your application has, let's say, a MySQL database and a Node.js deployment, you can see them as a single application.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks for answering all the questions, Daniel. It was great talking to you, and thanks for the amazing demo and presentation. I love doing live sessions because of we get some nice questions and interactions. But this is being recorded as well, and I know people would watch it later on. But if you have any further questions, you can leave it in the comment. But I would recommend joining the Lens community and asking it over there in the forums. I think that's the
Yes.
best way to do it. And once again, thanks for the time, Daniel, and yeah, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kunal. Thanks again for the opportunity and for your time. So hope you feel better today, and yeah, have a good
Asking
day.
for your social handle. Yeah, I will update it in the description, the
Yeah,
LinkedIn.
that's my LinkedIn profile. Feel free to add me there. We'll keep in touch.
Yeah, sounds good. All
Thank
right.
you, Kunal. Bye
Thanks,
bye.
everyone.
Thank you, everybody.